G'day guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a movie review. This movie was made in 1995, directed by Anders Jakobsen. This is a Swedish horror comedy, but don't worry, if you don't like reading subtitles, you won't have to put up with it because it's dubbed in English. So the whole film is in English, dubbed, which is pretty strange coming from a non-English speaking country. But anyway, this film is called Evil Ed. Now, Evil Ed is considered a bit of a horror comedy classic in Sweden, so I went into this one with very high expectations. A lot of hype was surrounding this movie. So whether or not that was a good or bad thing, only time would tell, because, as I said, I heard a lot of good things about it, so yeah, I went in there thinking that I hope this delivers. So the movie is about Ed, on the front cover there, who works in the censorship department of film. He goes through these films and cutting out parts that he believes aren't appropriate. So, especially for us horror fans, that is all too familiar. A lot of horror films these days are cut. So this film really does Ed is working in this department. And he starts off by cutting these really sort of mild films. He's a very mild man, doesn't like his violence, so he seems to be very happy with what he's doing. He's got a wife and child, so everything seems to be perfect for him. He's got a job that he seems to really like, so, who could ask for anything more? So he's going around, he's doing these film cuts, and then he gets a call from this guy who is into the gory scene. He's the gore and sex sort of department. And he asks Ed, well, he doesn't ask, but pretty much tells him that he needs a new person working in censorship for these gory films because the guy that he had committed suicide. And at the start of the film, there is a pretty good gory sort of scene and a really funny scene which shows this guy's suicide. So Ed reluctantly takes this job offer, and he is working and he's cutting these really, really gory films and really, really funny. You actually get to hear some of the dialogue and it makes you laugh. I actually thought some of it was really clever and really set the mood for a horror comedy. So Ed is really uncomfortable with this and he complains to his boss, but the boss says, "You have to work for me, otherwise I'm going to fire you." So Ed doesn't want to lose his job, so he bites the bullet and he keeps cutting these films. And it's pretty much 24/7 he is just exposed to these brutal sort of killings, over the top gore. And he really doesn't like it. Then he starts having nightmares about these killings on screen, and he starts hallucinating, seeing these really sort of weird monster things, and really, really funny but creepy at the same time. And he's just exposing himself to all this death so much that eventually his mind snaps and he turns into this murderous kind of psychopath, and he goes around and he starts doing what he sees in these films. So that's as far as I go with the story. Now, even if I gave away the whole story with spoilers, it wouldn't have any effect because it doesn't rely on story, it just relies on the funny dialogue. So that's what a horror comedy does. It doesn't really rely on story. What I liked about this movie was the fact that it was a very serious sort of subject matter. Now, I couldn't help but think that this director was having a stab at people who consider horror fans freaks. Just the overall thought that if you watch too many horror films, you're going to turn into a psycho. So I really thought that this director took a story that is pretty serious, but really intelligently twisted it so it's really funny, and it kind of gave the impression that he was laughing at these people who have these really uneducated opinions about horror fans. So the fact that Ed is watching all these horror movies, he ends up turning into a psychopath, and that's pretty much what people really think of horror fans. People who go on killing sprees, they blame the movies, which is really unfair. So to see that sort of story in this movie, I was surprised. I actually thought it was a very intelligent way at making a horror comedy, but at the same time address an issue of these sort of uneducated opinions. So the film is based on an uneducated opinion, I guess you could say, that this guy does turn into a lunatic because of his exposure to violence and gore. Now, the acting, it didn't require great acting. It's a horror comedy, as I said. It's very over the top, and the voices were dubbed. And they were dubbed, some of them were dubbed really badly, but deliberately. And that's what made it really funny. So in these kind of films, you don't have to be a good actor at all. Although I think the guy who played Ed did a fantastic job. He was very sort of mild, but kind of creepy at the same time. He had that really sort of creepy look. And when he finally does snap, he does come across as a pretty creepy, sort of intimidating person, although he is not very big. He just had the weird sort of creepy look. Now, the mood to the film was actually quite good as well. Now, it's not often that a horror comedy can come across as creepy at the same time, and I thought that this film has some genuinely creepy moments, and that really creeped me out. So it kind of doubled as a genuine horror movie and also a comedy. So it wasn't flat out just over the top in everything. I thought that the director had a few goes at being serious during the creepy scenes, and I thought it really paid off. I thought it gave something a bit more variety to the film. So you never take it seriously, but there are moments of the film where you'll think, well, that was a bit creepy. But yeah, so a lot of good things going for this movie. Now, with every good thing, I guess there comes a bad thing. And this movie, the lines, I have to say before I get to the bad things, the actual dialogue in this movie was really good. There are some really, really funny scenes, and it will make you laugh out loud. Now, the very beginning, you get a gory scene, and I'm not going to tell you what the guy says, but it will make you laugh. And I thought, really set the mood very early that this is going to be a light-hearted sort of approach. And overall, I thought the dialogue was very witty. Some of it was very cheesy. Now, this film was made in 1997, I think. It was released in 1997, but it had a very sort of 80s feel to it. And the director is obviously a fan of 80s horror. So those of you who are into 80s horror, which I've never really been a fan. I haven't really got into the 1980s style of horror. But if you're a fan of that kind of horror, you will get something out of this because it does, I guess you could say, pays homage to 1980s sort of gory, silly films. Some of the lines are very cheesy, but they fit the actual mood to the film perfectly. It's not a serious film, so all these cheesy sort of lines just add to the value of the film. Now, as I said, there are negatives to the movie, and the biggest negative for this movie was the fact that the gore was very limited. Now, it's supposed to be a splatter film, or I think it was a splatter film, but it just didn't have any splatter. There was one really good gore scene, and that was right at the end. And the start, well, it wasn't overly graphic, but that was a fairly good gore scene. So I guess you could say two scenes of gore, and the rest was pretty much off screen, which really took me by surprise. I had to wait a long time to even see, half a kill, if you could say that. There are some gory scenes on the films that Ed is cutting, but that doesn't count because it's not actually part of the proper movie. So I was really, really disappointed with the lack of gore, and I felt that if it had good gore, this would have been an absolute masterpiece of the horror comedy genre. If it, films like Shaun of the Dead, Slither, Brain Dead, Bad Taste, they had great comedy and they had really good gore. So I would have put this film up there with them if it had gore, but unfortunately the gore is few and far between. A lot of it was off screen. You get to see a lot of aftermath of the killing. But for a horror comedy, I just expected a lot more gore. I don't know if this is considered, well, it says on the back it's a splatter film. So it definitely wasn't that for me. The gore, the gore scene at the end was really good, but unfortunately, yeah, that was all. It was pretty much all you get. So gore hounds, you're going to be disappointed with this one. But if you like collecting films from different countries and seeing films that are regarded as classics, then I'll definitely pick this one up. It's definitely, the horror elements, the comedy elements to it, and the genuine, like some scenes of genuine horror will probably, you get a bit out of it. But I just felt that this director missed an opportunity to make an absolute masterpiece. He had it in his hand and it slipped through his fingers. Just the fact that it had limited gore really hurt it, in my opinion. In the end, I was very disappointed with how it came across. I thought it had so much good going for it, but then it was just let down because it just wasn't that violent. Now, there's a lot of blood, but it's just not really graphic, and I expected a lot more in the gore department. But I'm not going to say it's a bad film at all. I actually thought it's well worth purchasing, but yeah, if you're a gore hound, you're going to be disappointed. So this is the Swedish film Evil Ed, directed by Anders Jakobsen. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.